Hi, this is Mike from Minimal 3DP, and today I'm going to start the process of converting my 5 Plus to a Core XY system. I'm a big fan of the Core XY systems, particularly Boron and Rat Rig. Unfortunately, those systems will cost me anywhere between maybe $1,000 and $1,500 to build or buy, and I just don't have that money right now. But what I do have is an Ender 5 Plus. And so what I've decided to do is convert that Ender 5 Plus over to a Core XY system. In looking around online, I discovered the Mercury system, which is a conversion for the Ender 5 Plus. Now, right now, they're just starting to roll over from the Mercury 1.1. And so I'm going to go ahead and attempt to build the 1.1. I'm going to point out there's a couple problems here. Initially, when I looked through everything, I thought, oh, it has lots of great documentation, but it turns out the documentation's incomplete. I also looked through the GitHub, and the GitHub does have all sorts of drawings and schematics, but unfortunately, those schematics are for the Mercury 1, not the 1.1. So this is going to be a little stop and start as I try to figure out how to put this thing together. I will say this, I do like the look of the design, and all told, if I was to print all the parts I needed for this on one printer, it would probably take me under 24 hours. So the parts are pretty easy to print. And also, I will say this in the documentation, the bill of materials is pretty well documented. And most of the stuff you need, I think the most expensive thing here is probably the board and maybe the stepper motors. But I have both of those. To get started with the printed files is actually pretty easy. They have a little configurator here. So I can go ahead and select which printer I have, what tooth idlers I have, and the two choices are standard or mellow. And then I can also use tension plates, either T-nut or tapped. I'm using T-nut. So I can just click that and the files will eventually start to download. It may take a minute or two. And so they're currently downloading. And all told, there are 19 files that need to be printed. So here's a list of all the files to be printed. They actually have it set up so I don't have to do duplicates of any of these. I just print them straight down the list. As I mentioned previously, it would probably take me on one printer about 24 hours to print all this. It's really not that bad. Now I had multiple printers going, so this took me about 12 hours to do everything. I did have to reprint some stuff that I messed up by mistake. The initial step here on this build is to strip the frame, particularly of all the gantry, so I need to take off the X and Y gantry. Gone ahead and taken everything off the printer. This is the back of the printer, this is the back left, there's the right. That's why I have it oriented, so you can see it. So I have that all set up, X and Y is all stripped. I can leave everything else as is, and then I'll need to start putting everything together. I'm going to start with the X and then the Y motors. Now my next step is to test the fit of the dowels I'm using. So let me switch over to my desktop cam so you can see them. So here's the dowel, and one of the things they recommend that if these are tight, to go ahead and sand the dowels a little bit. In my case, they were tight getting the bearing on there. But once I've gotten on there, I feel like it's fairly loose and it's moving around nicely. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and not sand anything for right now. I may wind up coming back to this. The other thing I've done is gone ahead and tested, make sure that the dowels fit in this piece. Everything appears to fit nice and snug. So I feel really pleased with that. My tolerances are all good. So I don't think I need to sand these down. So I'm just going to leave these as is. If I have to sand them, I'll come back. So let's go ahead and get started with this. Going over to the project page, they have really good documentation for putting together the stepper mounts. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with that. There's a list of the parts required here, and I believe I have everything. Let's go ahead and check. I need a total of 3 flange stacks, and looking at this, it's basically 2 flanges and then 2 spacers, a spacer on either side. Let me go ahead, I'm going to scroll down here and let me get these flange stacks on the dowel before I insert things. So if we compare the drawings, looking at the drawing on the top, the drawing on the bottom, and compare that to what I have, that's looking pretty good. So these look correct. So now what I need to do is go ahead and put the top on. So I'm just going to grab this and place that on like that. Let's just check, make sure everything's spinning. Everything feels like it's spinning very well. That feels good. So now let's go ahead and screw these parts together. A quick review of the direction shows me before I screw this in, I actually need to put the stepper together. What I've done is the gears need to be, according to the directions, if you look down here at the bottom, 9.2 millimeters from the bottom. So what I've gone ahead and done is printed a little piece here that's 9.2 millimeters, and then I'm going to use that as my spacer. So here's my 9.2 millimeter piece. I'm just going to put that right there. And then I'm going to motor a little bit. It's the flat sides right there. I'm going to make sure the grub screw is going against the flat part and just push that down so it's snug to the 9.2 spacer. And then I'll go ahead and let me get an Allen wrench. I've gone ahead and tightened the gear on there. Again, that should be 9.2. So I should be all right. It feels nice and snug. So I'm good to go there. So let's go back over to the directions and see where to go from here. As you can see, this blue box is facing the way the wires need to go. So the wires need to be faced towards the northeast, at least according to this drawing. And then I'm going from the bottom up into the stepper motor to screw the whole part together. What I need to do is I needed to go ahead and find a longer Allen wrench to actually go through the model to reach the bottom. So let's see if we can go ahead and do this. So I have my stepper oriented appropriately. Now I'm going to flip it over very carefully so I can screw everything together. You also need to make sure this piece is flush with the stepper motor. It sort of snaps in. So let's go ahead and we'll see if we can screw this in now. So I've put this upside down. I still believe it's oriented correctly, and I'm going to go ahead and drop in the screws, see if I can get them started. So I got the first one started, so that's good. So I want to make sure it's still pushed down tight. So it's nice and tight. Let's go ahead and do the other screws. So I'll do those off camera and come back. So I have this all screwed together. Everything appears to rotate still. I'm oriented correctly according to the drawings. So that's all looking good. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the other stepper motor, the right-hand side. So if I look at these directions, the teeth need to be upside down and it needs to be 5.8. So I have my little spacer here. So the teeth are upside down, spacer's right there. So let's go ahead and tighten this in. So I have the grub screw pointed towards the flat side. And I actually have a second grub screw here, side. So I'll go ahead and tighten that too. Take out my spacer. So there we go. So now let's go ahead and put the pieces together. Let me put my spacer back in my box. Before I proceed, I'm just going to go ahead and check to make sure that I have a good fit here. Dowels. Yes, my dowels fit really well. This is all snapping together. So now let's go ahead and put together my flange stacks. I'm going to start with this one. Again, that sort of, it's tight getting on, but once I get it on, it feels all right. This sounds awful getting on. But it appears to be okay. Get those oriented correctly. Let's put our spacers on. So this one is now finished and inserted. This one, I believe we need a total of 2 flange stacks. So let's go ahead and get these together. This one doesn't want to fit quite as well, but I have some extra dowels. So let's just try switching dowels out and see if these fit a little bit better. It's there. That fits all right. So that's good. So let's put 2 spacers here. So that's 1 spacer for that stack. And then 1 spacer for this next stack. Okay, so I have those, and then I need spacers on either side. Oops. Careful here. Insert that there. Okay, let's get the top on. If you look, those are spinning, so that's good. Now, based on the way this needs to be oriented, I'm going to orient the motor like this. Or is it like that? Let me see if I can find a picture. That's not going to work that way. It's either this way or this way. So let me find a picture and see if I can tell. So I believe the wire on the right-hand side needs to be pointed towards these 2 flanges here. So I'm going to flip this over and then see if I can get this down tight. And I want to go ahead and just clean this out a little bit. So I have my tool right here. I'm just going to scrape that hole out a little bit. And that's fitting tighter. So I just need to move a little material there. So now what I'm going to try to do, and everything's spinning, including that. Now let's try dropping the screws down here, see if I can get this started. I'm going to start with this hole. Looks like that screw bit. So that's good. Clean that out. Let me see if I can get the screws in there. Okay. Those holes are a little tight, so I'm going to clean those out as well. Now, what I'm going to do is I have my Swiss Army knife and I have a little awl here. Just going to go ahead, give a twist here, and a twist there. Hopefully, it gives me a little bit more space here. Ah, there we go. Now, I'm not complaining about the tolerances here. It's just, particularly, I'm not surprised there's problems with the holes in the bottom print. So I'm not torquing that too tight. Oh, I did the wrong hole. Let's just give that a twist. So now I'm going to go ahead and tighten these as much as I can. So get these all fixed. Now it's nice and tight. Everything is still moved. This is flush here. So now I have the X and Y axes completed. So I'm going to go ahead and put those aside. Found this image on the Discord server. So this is the front of the machine for the X and Y steppers. It looks like we have a pin going down through the front here. So we have a pin going down the front and then a flange stack in the middle there. So let's switch over to my desktop cam and we'll take a look. So based on the drawing, what I'm going to need to do is I need to put a pin down through here, and then I'll have a flange stack here in the middle. So let's go ahead and start doing this. Now I've already tested these to make sure they fit. It's my dowels fit. First thing I'm going to do is put a spacer here, top of my flange stack. I probably need a set of forceps, but I don't have any right now. I also need this piece to push this back. So now let's go ahead and push this in. So it looks like I got that in. So I got the one flange in. Just need to push this down again. Need to make sure I have enough room here. So now I'm going to fit in the other flange. Okay. I have that in, sort of. I need to go ahead and try to fit in another spacer. So I need a little bit more space here. So let's see if I can push this in a little more. Take my handy Swiss Army knife and let's get the screwdriver out. See if I can push this in a little more. Here we go, I got it snap in. And this is a tight fit there, so it's hard to work with. So I suggest you have a flathead screwdriver. Don't push things in. This is spinning correctly, so that's good. So now let's take mother dowels. Let's see if any of these fit in better. Yeah, so let's go with this one. Go sit that in, put a spacer in. And I'm going to put in one side of the flange. I got it in, so I'm going to push it back. And I need to put in the other side of the flange. Let's see if we can get this. Ah, it's in. So now the hard parts, we need to go ahead and get the other spacer in. I'm going to slip this in. Take my screwdriver and see if I can push this over a little bit. Oops. Try holding this up. This one's fitting a little better. I'm putting a little pressure on it, and I'm just going to and that is it. So now I have these set up correctly, and this feels good. So now I'm going to have a screw holding this in the front here, and then a screw here to be the, so I can do tightening, so I can tension the belts. So now what I'm going to need to do is figure out how this gets installed, and I'll show you the next step. I've gone ahead and switched over to my printer. I've turned it around so this is the left side. This is the left stepper right here. You'll notice there's a little bit of an L shaped here. This L needs to be pointing up towards the front of the printer. So it's going to be sitting something like this, right at the edge of the printer. So most of the steppers can be hanging off the back. So what I'm doing is I have M550 screws with T-nuts. So I'm just going to go ahead and insert these T-nuts into the extrusion. So I sort of have them placed ahead of time. Or better yet, let's do this. So I've gone ahead and started the screws, and I have the T-nuts in place. As I said, this L shape needs to be pointed down the rail towards the front. So I'm just going to turn my T-nuts so they'll insert correctly. And then I'm going to try to tighten this and see if this grabs. Everything feels nice and tight, snug. So now let me go ahead and do the other side. So I'm going to start those screws off camera and then I'll come back. I've gone ahead and started the screws with the T-nuts. And again, I want the L pointed up the rail towards the front. I'm going to try to screw this in. Okay, so that one bit, so that's good. So both of those are installed. So that's good. So now we have the left and right side installed. Everything still spins and moves. Everything feels good. Wires are all right. Probably have to put extensions on those, but I can deal with that. So that's great. So let's go ahead and just realize this is slightly off camera. So let me move my camera. So there's the right side. You can see it's totally installed. So I apologize about that. Trying to do this with where you can see everything without me in the way is a problem. So what I'm going to do is turn the camera off and rotate the printer around the other way, and so I can get to the other side. So right now I have the camera zoomed in on the front right side of the printer. So I believe these pieces are going to be installed like this. The little piece here to do the belt tensioning. And so let's go ahead and see if we can get this together. Before I install the front piece, I'm going to go ahead and install the linear rail. Now what I've done is I've pretty much gone every other screw hole here, and I've started the T-nut. And I want to get these in so that way I can figure out where I need this front piece. I need room so that way I can tighten it. I'm just going to go ahead and move these around and insert this down. There we go. So I'm just going to go ahead and start tightening these. Slide it around. Now what I saw a post online that somebody was putting it about 50 meters back, 50 millimeters back from the front. So what I'm doing is I have my ruler right here, measuring 50 millimeters. Let me leave that there right now. Now I'll go ahead and tighten this down. Get this nice and tight now. And I probably will still wind up having to move something here, but let's just be nice and tight. That's moving well. So that's good. And then looking at this, this gives me some play here where when I have the screw so I can tighten and adjust the belts. So now what I'm going to do is totally install this side and then I'll work on the other side. So let me get my M550 screw and T-nut, and then I'll figure out the other pieces. So I wasn't right in the screw size I need. I need an M520. I'm going to insert that through. It goes down the bottom. Let me go ahead and start the T-nut. T-nut started. So let me go ahead over to the printer and I'll go ahead and insert that down. And we'll figure out the rest. Inserting this like this. And I'm just going to do it right now, right up against the linear rail. Now I'm leaving this a little loose so I can figure out how to do the other piece, but it is holding. So now the other piece, I believe, sits something like this. And then there's a screw going through here to here that I can use to tighten. So let's go ahead and put this part together. So for this, I need two M510s and two T-nuts. So I'm going to just go ahead and start this piece. Doesn't help, I probably need to wash my hands because I touched that linear rail, so now my hands are all greasy. Okay, so I have both of those started. So now I'm going to go over and tighten this on. And then I'll have to figure out what screw I need to use here for the tightening to do the tension on the belts. I'm going to line these up. And the rails here. And I want to line those two holes up. Push it together. I'm going to go ahead and make sure this part is really tight. That's nice and tight. Those holes are lined up. Now I just need to figure out which screw to put in here for my tensioning. And from the look of this, I have lots of room here to tighten, so I'm really pleased with that. So I did notice an issue here. I'll do this just so I can show you. Okay. These two are not the same. The one with the flange stack in the middle is the left-hand side. The one with the flange stack at the top is the right-hand side. So I did have it installed correctly. I want you to be able to see that. So I have that installed. And now let me go back and try to figure out what screws I need to finish the tensioner. Because I'm going to put a screw in here to tension, I'm going to take a chance and try putting threaded inserts in here. I think that would be a good idea. And then I'm using M316 as my tensioning screw. I'm going to go ahead and give this a shot. Just sink these in here. I just think that's a good idea. They're sunk in. What I'm going to do is pause and just let everything cool down. Let these sort of set. And then I'll go ahead and install them. Now that looks good. So let me let these cool and then I'll come back. So I've completed my threaded inserts and now I'm going to move back over to my printer and install these. And I want to point out that this one with the flange stack in the middle is going to go on the left hand side of the front of the printer. This will go on the right hand side with the flange towards the top. And so let me switch over to my tripod cam and then we'll take a look there. I'm going to go ahead and get started here on the right hand side. What I'm going to do is just insert this T-nut down and push this side. Put this side down, and then I'm just going to start this screw a little bit. Okay, so that's barely started, but this is part of the tensioner right here. So I've installed this little piece here, 2 screws, and then installed this, and this is part of the tensioner. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and just tighten this side down. So that's totally tight. And then I have this as part of to increase the tension on the belts as I install those, but I'm just going to leave this as is. And I'm going to switch over and take a look at the left side now. So I'm looking at the left side of the printer, and all I'm going to do is just lay down my linear rail, and then I'm going to take a measurement here. I want this 50 millimeters from the end. Just going to bring this down like that. So that's about right. And install the left-hand side right now. I'm just going to set this down and barely start this screw. Okay, that's barely started. And then I'm just going to go ahead and tighten this down. Now, the last thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and screw down the linear rail here. And as I mentioned, I'm doing it 50 millimeters from the end here. So 50 millimeters in the extrusion. And I'll go ahead and do that off camera. But for right now, this is part one of my Mercury 1 build. And so what I'm going to do is stop here and then do the rest on a separate video. But I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments. If you like what I'm doing, please feel free to give me a like and subscribe. Feel free to share my videos. If you have any feedback, I'm very open to it. Again, I want to thank you for your time. Hope you have a great day. Thanks. Bye.